Hey everyone, welcome to the Autoimmune Dietitian YouTube channel. My name is Annie. I am a registered dietitian nutritionist, and I primarily work with people struggling with a host of symptoms from underlying inflammatory and autoimmune conditions. A lot of my clients experience things like pain, digestive issues, trouble sleeping, fatigue. So in my work with my clients, I help them implement a personalized nutrition roadmap really designed to help them improve mobility, concentration, get their energy back, and help them live the lives that they should be living. So today we are focusing on fasting and the menstrual cycle. So women have special needs when it comes to fasting, and especially when you're dealing with a menstrual cycle. Changes to our delicate hormonal balance can cause a number of issues for us, and it's important to understand why women need to be particularly careful with calorie restriction during our cycle and how to optimize fasting while we are menstruating. So before I jump in, I just need to attach a disclaimer to this video that the information in today's talk is not the substitute for the diagnosis, treatment, or care of disease by a medical provider. This is for informational purposes only, so please consult your qualified health professional for any changes to your medical care. All right, so before we dive in, let's first talk about the phases of the menstrual cycle. So we can break this down into basically 4 distinct phases. So the first phase is your menstruation phase. It's actually when you're actively bleeding, having an active period. This is when you're shedding your uterine lining, and it lasts around 5 to 6 days on average for most people. At this point in time, your estrogen and progesterone levels are at their lowest. The second phase is called the proliferative phase, and this is basically from the end of your period until when you ovulate. So it's around day 6 to around day 14 on average. This is when your uterine lining is starting to build up again and your estrogen levels rise. So phase 1 and phase 2 are technically known as your follicular phase. And then we enter phase 3, which is ovulation. Ovulation is technically when the egg leaves the ovary, and when it actually leaves the ovary, it is called ovulation, or when you ovulate. So estrogen is rising up until this point, and it signals the brain to release your luteinizing hormone, or your LH, and that's what causes your egg to be released. And then after the egg is released, your estrogen levels drop. So typically this is around day 14, but this can vary greatly, anywhere from day 13, 12, all the way up to day 22. And the last phase is called the secretory or the luteal phase. And this is basically when the point right after ovulation until the start of your next period. Your progesterone levels are rising up until your next period starts, and then both progesterone and estrogen drop. So why are we talking about this, and why is this important? Well, it's important to know the phases because when we're going to talk about how to fast for your body and for your menstrual cycle, you'll need to know what those phases are, because each phase is a little bit different in terms of how you want to treat your body and how you want to fast and exercise and what you should focus on for your diet. So now I want to jump into what can interfere with your menstrual cycle. So stress and hormone imbalance, both of which can be triggered by fasting, can affect your menstrual cycle. The caveat here is that there's very little research on the effects of fasting done on women. So the few studies they are able to find these, this is what I found basically, what can negatively affect you when you're fasting. So the first thing is stress. So the stress response doesn't really matter what it is. Your body handles stress the same way as if you're running from a tiger, or you're sitting in traffic, or you're doing very intense exercise, or you're restricting your calories because it thinks it's starving, and that can be stressful on your body. So just an overview of what happens when you are having a stress response. Your HPA axis, which is your hypothalamus pituitary adrenal axis, is activated, and that signals the release of a hormone called corticotrophin. Corticotrophin actually it has a kind of an interesting function. It signals some other hormones to be released, but when there is an imbalance in your corticotrophin hormone, it can actually suppress your reproductive function during stress. So the other thing that the corticotropin or CRH hormone does is it stimulates the release of 2 other hormones, the adrenocorticotrophic hormone, which is your HCTH, and cortisol. So the cortisol is really important here because cortisol can actually suppress your LH release. And remember, LH is what triggers the release of the egg in ovulation, and it can alter your hormonal balance, which can affect your menstrual cycle. The other kind of interesting thing about fasting is it affects your hormones. So again, all of your stress hormones are hormones, but generally when I'm talking about hormones, I mean like your sex hormones. So intermittent fasting can actually decrease estrogen production. And this happens because of a hormone called kisspeptin. Kisspeptin stimulates the production of your LH, or your luteinizing hormone, and your follicular stimulating hormone, or FSH. And so what fasting does, it can actually cause kisspeptin to decline, which will lower estrogen levels, and that can affect your menstrual cycle in terms of amenorrhea, so skipping cycles, or even can affect infertility. So when your estrogen levels start to decline naturally the week before your period starts, that decline in estrogen can already be stressful on your body, and it can trigger your cortisol levels to rise. So if intermittent fasting is stressful on the body and you're adding more fuel to the fire in terms of, fasting while you have declining estrogen levels, it's just going to be for some people, it's going to be too much, and it'll be too stressful, and your body will react in a non-positive way. And if you were doing fasting for the benefits of it, and if you are too stressed, this is not going to be beneficial for you. So how do you fast safely if you want to do it? So fasting according to your menstrual cycle can actually help keep your hormones balanced and keep your cycle regular. Again, everyone's different, so you really want to go by how you feel with this. But generally speaking, so the first phase of which is your menstrual cycle, you want to start, just doing your normal overnight fast, 12 hours, maybe 14 hours, pushing it a little bit. But you want to start this around day 3 of your period. The second phase of your menstrual cycle, during the follicular phase, or the proliferative phase, that is when you can push your fast a little bit longer if you feel up to it. This is usually the point of time. This is, again, day around like 6 or 7 to day 14. This is when you feel like you have the most energy. So doing high intensity exercises during this time is really beneficial. Insulin sensitivity is optimal during these 2 weeks, so you can definitely eat more carbs to fuel your workouts. And you generally just feel better during this point in time. Phase 3, the ovulatory phase. So usually your body temperature starts to rise around this time. So you want to push your fasting back a bit and reduce your exercise intensity. Now you want to focus more on proteins, a little bit less on carbs as your insulin sensitivity starts to decline. And then the last phase, or the luteal phase, is, again, right after ovulation and right before menstruation. You really want to take it down to a low intensity. So low intensity exercise. You definitely do not want to do the fasting now. I would hold on the fasting. Overnight is still okay, but you just want to this is the time to really pamper your body and be gentle. Insulin resistance is also lower, so be careful about eating simple carbohydrates. This is obviously the time usually when you're craving sweets and chocolates, so it's just something to be aware of, that you are more insulin resistant during this time, and you won't be able to process sugar as effectively as you normally do. So hopefully this information will encourage you to be very mindful when you try fasting. Again, not every woman will have a negative reaction to fasting. Some women's bodies are completely able to tolerate fasting, and they thrive doing it, and they feel amazing, and it works, and it's great. But for those of you who don't, there's a reason why, and maybe trying to do fasting in a bit more of a cycle, you'll find that gives you a much better result. So the bottom line is, listen to your body. Try fasting, but be flexible with it, and it's not an all or nothing practice. So for those of you who would like more help managing your autoimmune disease or your digestive issues, I would love to chat with you. I offer free 15-minute discovery calls to learn about your goals and to see if we are a good fit for each other. So go to my website, AnnieRubin.com, to check that out. You can book that appointment there. You can also download, I have a number of free materials on my website. My most recent one is my top anti-inflammatory food guide. So there's a bunch of recipes in there with my top anti-inflammatory foods, so you can download that as well. And then lastly, on my website, you can sign up for my newsletter. It comes out every Thursday to your inbox. I put out a lot of great information about autoimmune disease and diet and lifestyle, so you can subscribe. If you don't like it, you can unsubscribe. You will not hurt my feelings. And if you like the video today, please hit the little subscribe button. These videos come out every week. Again, I'm always talking about something related to autoimmune disease, inflammation, lifestyle, diet. So hopefully you subscribe and continue to watch. Thanks so much for joining me today.